if anyone really epitomizes Tip O'Neill's statement, all politics is local, it's Tom Lyons. Tom is someone from South Boston who has always remembered his roots, who, when there were no organizations representing veterans, organized the vets in South Boston, brought them down to Washington to the dedication of the memorial, dressed in sport jackets and wearing roses in their lapels. He organized, without the help of the government or without the help of any institutions, one of the very first memorials to Vietnam veterans, to his fallen friends and colleagues here in South Boston, and it's right over my shoulder. It's interesting being here at UMass Boston. We have the South Boston Memorial behind us. Right over here we have the Dorchester Memorial, we have the Kennedy Library, and we have Sister Coretta's monument. Tom is really a person of the people. I've been very proud and privileged to know him for the past 30 years, and I hope you'll join me in welcoming him. He's going to say a few words about that D word, the draft.
Thanks, Kevin. I made the mistake several months ago of telling Paul Camacho that I had recently been appointed to the Selective Service Appeals Board up in the town where I live in Wakefield. And so Paul, being the exuberant Marine that he is, figures I know so much about the Selective Service that he asked me to say a few words about it. So my comments this morning are going to be brief because I think there's so many speakers that need to be able to get up here and talk about the programs and services that we need to have in place for our returning veterans. The Selective Service it goes back to 1940 during World War II, and it ended, the act expired in 1947. And around 1948, President Truman saw a decline in the registration of young men in the military, that it was reinstituted, and shortly after that, the Korean War started, and nearly 27% of those participants in the Korean War were drafted. Certainly in Vietnam, where the draft was such a major issue, about 25% of the people who participated in that conflict were draftees. Around 1973, we started to look at an all-volunteer army. So once again, the draft boards were closed by President Ford, and around 1980, President Carter, upon the invasion of Afghanistan by the Russians, decided that we needed to get back into some kind of a standby mode for a national emergency. So he reinstituted and have since then have had a standby draft. And Paul asked me specifically to talk about what would happen if there was, a activation. Pretty much what would happen is certainly the national headquarters from the president. It'd go right down through Congress and the Senate. If approved, then it would go into the national level, in which all of the local boards would ramp up and start to put together their workforce to start to review those claims of individuals whose actually birth dates would be where the lottery would start. So, and my role on the local board would be to review those who figured that they wanted to get an exemption of some kind, and we would review it and review the claims and make a decision. But I think the question today for me was, when Paul asked me to talk about it, and it's it's almost like watching paint dry when you want to get into some of this minutia. I think for me, thinking about what's caused us as a community and as a nation to think about the draft. Why? Well, if you start looking at the fact that many of us that came back from Vietnam said, well, there'll never be another Vietnam. We learned our lesson. We're never going to send our troops off without the support of the president, our elected officials, and most importantly, the people of this country. Well, we saw in Gulf War that exactly what we did. We sent the troops off with support and we welcomed them home. Well, here we are now looking at Iraq and Afghanistan in a totally different light if you're an 18 or 19-year-old young man or woman. I think Congressman Frank said it best, that the military right now is hard-pressed to get young men and women to join. The Marine Corps missed mission for the first time since 1995. The Army is down 30%. Long deployments that young men and women and those with families now go on, let alone just the thought of going to war. Reserve and the Guard are much more upfront and out in combat zones than they were ever put in before. 40% of the troops are now in Iraq are from the Reserve and the Guard. Military pay for those who are serving, housing. I mean, we can go through all these issues, and at the end of it, ladies and gentlemen, we don't nearly pay nearly enough for the men and women who are in our military. So why would anyone want to join, other than the fact that you can become a policeman or fireman and get civil service? So we have to look long and hard at not so much is the draft going to come back, but what are the causes and what are some of the things that we have to be doing to support our congressmen and senators to ensure that the programs and services that are there for the troops when they come home. One of the things that I think when the panel gets up here to talk is we have to really start thinking creatively. We have the programs and services in the Commonwealth here, but we have to get away from the notion that just because someone served in the military that he or she is going to be taken care of. That notion went out the window when my dad and so many other World War II veterans came home. Now we have to fight, and that's one of the reasons I got involved in the veterans movement back in 78 and 77 with Kevin and Paul and so many others. I wanted to make sure that the things that my dad and so many others fought for were going to be in place when I got old enough to be able to take advantage of them. Well, I'm old enough now to start thinking about taking advantage of them. And over the last, who knows how many years, we continue to see a budget in the VA system get cut and cut. And now we need to fight for these young men and women who are serving today. Because if we don't fight, it's the men and women who are growing up, who are the future of this country, are going to start saying, well, they didn't care about the young men and women who were fighting in Afghanistan or in Iraq. Why should I worry about joining the military and serving this country? So it's the whole picture. We got to be creative in our thinking. We have to be the voice because certainly no one else is going to do it for us. I don't want to take too much time. I do want to get my good friend Congressman Stephen Lynch up here to be able to really articulate exactly what's going on. But I want to thank Paul and Kevin for the opportunity to at least let folks know a little bit about the selective service, although I didn't give you a whole lot of it. But it's out there. We are manned and we are ready should the President and our elected officials decide that we need to get more men into the military. Thank you.
I'll give our new Chancellor a brief introduction. I don't know why I'm thinking about Tip O'Neill and local politics today, but as I said earlier, I was on sabbatical over the summer, and I was downtown walking through North Station, and during the Democratic Convention, and a voice yelled out, actually he was just walking into the room, "Hey, Kevin!" And I said, I turned around, and there, sitting in a restaurant, was Ernie Washington. And Ernie said, "How's my friend over there doing?" And I didn't know what he was talking about at first. And then he said, "My friend, Keith." And then I realized that he was talking about our new Chancellor, Keith Motley, who's Ernie is known over at Northeastern. And I don't need any other endorsement than an endorsement from Ernie Washington about the commitment of our new Chancellor to our veterans and to this university. And he has been a person who's really worked with, for the community, and someone who's had great attention to the needs of veterans on this campus. As some of you know, last November we dedicated a memorial out over on the water to one of our students, former students, who was killed in Iraq a year ago last November. And the Chancellor really put that together for us, and I can't thank him enough for all he's done and all he continues to do. And he certainly has not just Ernie's, but all of our endorsements.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Kevin. I really do appreciate that. And we're going to have to make sure they get these step Reebok things fixed before someone else falls up here. Listen, Ernie, it's good to see you back there, man. Thank you for coming this morning. Thank you all for coming. I really do appreciate it. And I know I'm inserting myself in the middle of your morning, but I couldn't let something like this happen and let the provost be the only one you heard from this morning. I wanted to make sure I had an opportunity to come over too. Again, thank you for being here. And welcome to all of you that are here on this campus for the very first time. Know that this campus has long been involved with welcoming back our veterans. We provide services for our veterans and our students when they come back to this country, and also we provide benefits and offer an extensive network of support. The Office of Veteran Affairs, the Veterans Upward Bound Program, the Students Veterans Center, and our wonderful William Joyner Center is focused on the study of war and social consequences, as all you know. So many of our veterans have come home and found a home here at UMass Boston, and we're so glad that you're here today. Know this is your home and that you're welcome here anytime to this beautiful campus. I know Kevin wanted to do this introduction that I'm going to have the honor of doing, but he gave it to me, and I really do appreciate that. He allowed me to insert myself. But before I go on, I also want to say to the Gold Star mothers, thank you all for being here today. And I know you've probably already said something about that, but to Chris Devlin, Flo Johnson, and to Nikki Likely, thank you for being here. Really appreciate your presence as well. You know, I'm gratified that so many of you come together today to continue the discussion of events in Iraq and Afghanistan, a discussion that was begun here on our campus in February with the visit of Senator Edward M. Kennedy to this very ballroom. To Congressman Frank and Congressman Meehan, so glad that you all were here today. But it's my honor to introduce Congressman Stephen Lynch. He's both a friend and neighbor to UMass Boston. Like so many of our students here at UMass Boston, Congressman Lynch was born and raised in a working class environment in the public housing project in South Boston. From his hard-working parents, he learned the value of a day's work and the dignity of working people. He learned the importance of education and community. Those values have followed him to this day. As many of you know, prior to his political career, he was a member of Boston's Ironworkers Local 7 and was eventually elected to serve as president of the Ironworkers Union. Like so many of our students here, he pursued his education while working full time. He earned his bachelor's from Wentworth, and he went on to earn a law degree from Boston College. and continued his advocacy, even though he had all those degrees, for working people as a labor and employment attorney. In 1994, he was elected into the Massachusetts House of Representatives. After just 14 months in office, he was elected to the Massachusetts State Senate in a special election. In the Senate, he served as chair of the Joint Committee on Commerce and Labor. In 1999, he earned his master's degree in public administration from Harvard University's John F. Kennedy School of Government. Congressman Stephen F. Lynch was first sworn into the United States Congress in October 2001, following the sudden passing of the legendary Congressman John Joseph Moakley. In the 109th Congress, Congressman Lynch serves on the Committee on Financial Services and the Committee on Government Reform, where he recently became the ranking member on the newly created Subcommittee on Regulatory Affairs. He is a friend to UMass Boston, a special friend to our Labor Resource Center in the College of Public and Community Service. We are so happy to have him in the discussion of our country's involvement in Iraq and Afghanistan. Ladies and gentlemen, Congressman Stephen F. Lynch.
Thank you, Keith. That was a very nice, very generous introduction. Good morning. It's still morning. Good morning, everyone. I understand I'm the last speaker between yourselves and lunch, so I'll try to be briefer than I think was ordinarily planned. I did have an opportunity to hear some of the remarks of Congressman Frank and also Congressman Meehan's speech. I was familiar with his remarks, and he gave a similar report to the Congress on his return from Iraq, so I'm familiar with his remarks. But before I begin, I would like to also just welcome the Gold Star mothers. My wife's grandmother was a Gold Star mother. My wife's Uncle Arnie was shot down over France in the last days of World War II, and my wife, being a dutiful granddaughter, attended a lot of the events on behalf of the Gold Star mothers and was very, very involved, along with my mother-in-law and my grandmother. So thank you for your sacrifice and your service. I know that people think of just the enlisted people being in the service, but I know from my own experience in dealing with the military and our military personnel that it's really when someone from your family joins the service, the whole family joins the service. So I want to thank you for your service to our country and for your loyalty to the memories of your loved ones. Thank you. Instead of prepared remarks, I noticed that there was probably the opportunity for a lot of ground being covered again because Congressman Frank and Congressman Meehan and I were asked to talk basically around the same topics around Iraq and about the state of our Veterans Affairs. When I was first appointed to the Congress, I was appointed to the Committee on Veterans Affairs. That was my first assignment, and I still serve on a subcommittee on the Committee of Government Reform on Veterans Affairs, so I'm still very much involved. I did want to distinguish my positions with those of my colleagues with great respect on 2 points. One, I did support the decision to give the President the power to use military force in Iraq back in November of, several years ago at the beginning of this war. I did so not because it was a move to democracy or a hunt for weapons of mass destruction, but those were certainly on the table. My own reasoning, after meeting countless times with the President's staff and also representatives of the previous administration, the Clinton administration, my reasons were for, frankly, to remove Saddam Hussein from power. And I think that unlike other leaders in the world, Saddam Hussein had demonstrated a willingness to act militarily outside his borders. He had waged a 10-year war with Iran. He had invaded Kuwait. He had used chemical weapons against his own people in northern Iraq, the Kurdish population there. He had fired Scud missiles into the civilian populations of Israel. He had acted countless times outside his borders. And it was my feeling after meeting with the Joint Chiefs of Staff and other leaders in our executive office that he had the potential to do so again. And as a new member of Congress, it was a very, very serious decision on my part. And so in making that decision, I made sure that I sat with Secretary Powell at the time, and Condoleezza Rice visited the White House, sat with Condoleezza Rice and CIA Director Tenet at the time, met countless times with them, also with, again, the Joint Chiefs, getting all the information I could. And while they did have a tendency to read off the same page, in making that decision, I made sure that I sat with members of the Clinton administration who were on the ground in Iraq during his administration. And I sat with David Kaye. He was the chief UN weapons inspector in Iraq during the Clinton administration, as well as Martin Indyke, who was Clinton's chief person in the Middle East at the time. And it was their reassurance that they thought that Saddam Hussein indeed presented a grave danger and a potent danger to the stability of the Middle East and also to the United States that led to my decision to support the option of the use of military force by the president in Iraq. So in that respect, I disagreed with Congressman Frank's position at the time, but in all honesty and all disclosure, that was my position. And it was similar to Congressman Meehan's position. He also supported the war, as I did. The second departure, I guess, between the position of one of my colleagues is that unlike Congressman Meehan, I also, have been to Iraq and received the briefings and understand fully well what the situation is on the ground. I am not of the opinion that we should telegraph a withdrawal schedule to the insurgents in Iraq of our plans to withdraw from Iraq. And I think it would probably undermine our efforts to bring stability to that region and accelerate the time when we can fully withdraw. And it is the same opinion of our military leadership in Iraq, that if we were to telegraph a withdrawal schedule to the insurgents, they would simply wait till we leave and then overturn the government that we leave behind. And it would also, in the withdrawal sequence, leave many of our troops in a very vulnerable position if they knew, in fact, our schedule. So I am not of the opinion that we should telegraph and publish our withdrawal schedule and make it public. I think that would put us at a severe disadvantage on the ground. What I would like to say is this: we are in agreement on the issue of veterans' health and veterans support for those of our people that are returning. And like all of the members of the congressional delegation, I spend a fair amount of time over at the Walter Reed Army Military Hospital, not far from Washington. And what I have seen there is a grave situation, one that I think we were unprepared for and are only now just beginning to address. One of the successes of our military preparedness in recent years has been that our survival rate in combat has risen dramatically. Our survival rate for injured soldiers has increased dramatically because of the body armor that we now give our troops, and also because of the nature of the conflict in Iraq, that we have really reduced the time between which a soldier is injured in battle and is actually hospitalized. During the Second World War and during Vietnam, that time was considerable because of the distance between the battlefront and army hospitals. Now, because of the technological changes and also the facts and circumstances of this conflict, we are now bringing back more and more of our young people and allowing them to survive, but at the same time bringing them back critically wounded. In my tour of the Army hospital over at Walter Reed, the one thing that they have commented on, I talked to the lieutenant colonel over there that's running the place, the number of amputees returning to the United States as a result of this conflict is far beyond what we had experienced in any conflict to date by this country and by our military. And we are currently unprepared for that. As of my visit several weeks ago, there were several hundred amputees that were being treated and rehabbed at Walter Reed. And I need to say, first of all, that the courage that I saw there among our young men and women who are returned to this country for rehab and who are amputees, some of them multiple amputees, is extraordinary. The courage of our people. I'll relate one story. There was a young woman there, younger than I, and she was a pilot of an Apache helicopter. She had been in country in Iraq for approximately 2 years, so she was one of the earliest. And apparently her aircraft, she was a co-pilot, was arriving at Baghdad International, formerly Saddam Hussein Airport, and some insurgents fired an RPG, a rocket-propelled grenade, up through the floor of her aircraft. And it downed the aircraft, injured her pilot and herself. It severed her right leg just below the knee and severed her left leg right at the hip. And she was in Walter Reed for rehab. And I had a chance to visit with her and talk with her. Her husband, who was also military, was there as well. And just to give you an idea of the courage of these people, you know, I asked if there was anything I could do for the family during their stay at Walter Reed. I was in the area, and I asked if there was any way that I could help. And she said, yeah, after some hesitation. She said, yeah, there is. She says, I want you to do anything you possibly can to get me back into the seat, of my helicopter, because I believe I can still fly. Now, that's an unbelievable statement from a woman who had been through what she had been through, but she was quite serious and quite committed. And we had a chance to talk to some of the doctors and the military personnel. And they confided to me that it would never be possible for her to re-enter combat. But they did say one thing, and it was encouraging. They said that we have departed from the policy where we view amputees and injured personnel in the military as unusable and in some cases relegated to civilian life. The Army and all of the branches of the military have now taken a new look at the condition and the value of those amputees and injured Army personnel in terms of their value to the military. And they assured me that they would do everything that they could to make sure she stayed in the service, which is she wanted to do. She had 13 years in at that time. And they said, they admitted that that had never been the policy in the past, that when they had an amputee, then that was pretty much the end of the road for those in service, and that they would transition them to civilian life. But they demonstrated, and there were some drill instructors there from Quantico who were working with some of the Marines who were actually running this. It was a room about this size, and it was an obstacle course with cones and ramps and stairs, and all of these amputees, most of the Marines, some Army, were running through this course with prosthetic limbs, and they were proud to tell me that they had just witnessed the first promotion of an amputee to become a DI with the United States Marines, so that this change in policy gave them hope that they would remain within the military and allowed to and be allowed to pursue their careers. One of the other changes that we're currently confronting with respect to our amputees is the technology of the day. When I was there at Walter Reed, I was there for a groundbreaking as well of a new amputee center, which is a sad enough statement in itself that we now need an entire center, an entire wing of Walter Reed just to address the needs of our amputees. But I think it's a long time coming, and it's certainly necessary. But in asking, we went sort of behind the scenes. They have a shop that's set up, and where these engineers and doctors and therapists work with each individual amputee to retrofit their prosthetic limbs so that they can be completely functional. And they do this all at Walter Reed right now, but it's sort of it looks like a machine shop, and it's just sort of, it looks like it was assembled in haste, let's put it that way, just thrown together. But they have all these people very diligently working on this new technology. I was disappointed that all of the major companies that were involved there were Scandinavian countries. They're from Denmark, Sweden, Finland. When I'd say, now who makes this prosthetic? Who makes this piece? Who came up with this device? It was all Scandinavian countries, not necessarily big companies, but it showed that we were not the Defense Department was not, and the American military was not making the research money available to make sure that we can develop those technologies in this country to help our own people. What my hope is rather than having one center at Walter Reed to address that, is that at some point in the New England region, for Vision 1, for those veterans who are here, and there are many, a lot of veterans agents here as well, is that we would have our own amputee center here. One of the remarkable things was in the recent United States Marines Marathon, and they run it, I think out of Quantico, I'm not sure, but they said they had 12 runners who completed the marathon with prosthetic limbs. And if you viewed these men and women, you would never know from their spirit and the way they carry themselves that they had ever lost limbs, and they're a proud example of what is possible for the young people in this country. I've seen the process from its very beginning. I have the proud honor of offering the candidacy of young people in my district for the military academies. Just last week, I nominated Mary Balakonis, who's a South Boston native, to the Air Force Academy. I have Jennifer Ng, who's a young Vietnamese woman from Randolph, who just finished second in her class at the Air Force Academy. There are probably 16 to 18 young people who have gone to the military academies with my appointment and with my support. And when you see the way those families are affected, and some have graduated and actually have gone into the military, you see what that means. And I have to say that in the days after September 11th, I was actually elected in the Democratic primary on September 11th, but I still had a lot of Joe Moakley's staff, and they continue to be with me. They said that they had never seen the number of applications from our young people to join and to seek admission to the military academies at West Point and Annapolis and the Air Force Academy at Colorado Springs. Now, I think that there's a corresponding commitment that we have to our young people, knowing why they joined the service, that we have a tremendous obligation to make sure that the health care system is there for our veterans, and it is not right now. And the one thing I want you to take away from Congressman Frank's talk, he talked about this starve the beast mentality, about some Republican leadership who think that if they commit all the resources of our country to other causes, which is basically tax cuts for the rich, that we would be able to that their cause is to take money away from everything else, whether it be housing for the elderly and handicapped or veterans' health care. That's what they're trying to do. That's what they're trying to do, dedicate all this money to other causes so that we don't have money for this. And that's a shame. They're treating, in my opinion, from sitting on that Committee of Veterans Affairs and seeing what our spending priorities are, the Republican leadership is treating veterans' health like an entitlement. Like an entitlement. Like it's something that they're giving to veterans, which is completely wrong-headed. The veterans in this country have earned that right. They've earned the right to decent health care. They put that uniform on. This is not an entitlement. This is something that has been paid for. This is something that we owe to them. And there has been talk about the draft, and I agree with Tom's remarks earlier. But the best way to present a shining example of what it means to join the military these days is to treat veterans with the respect and dignity that they deserve, and to elevate that position of being in the military. And we do that by example. We do that by example, by showing, by the way we treat veterans, what a high honor that is, and how deeply appreciated service in the military is by our government and by our people. That's how you increase the likelihood of people joining the military. And I do want to say, lastly, thank you to all my veterans agents. I see Tom Daly's over here, and there are others as well. Of course, Tom Lyons and Jeff Berdor. He's been a frequent flyer down to my office in Washington on behalf of the veterans, and there are others in this room as well that have been great champions of the veterans in this cause. I do think that we should redouble our efforts. I think that Congressman Frank is eminently correct in saying that this is a matter of what our priorities are as a nation, and it's not good enough to just wrap yourself in the flag. I was asked recently, what's the difference between my position and the position of the Republican leadership with respect to Veterans Affairs? And I said, well, it boils down to the definition of compassion. The definition of compassion, the first part of it is, if you look it up in Webster's, there's two parts. The first is a feeling of sympathy, or empathy with the misfortune of another. That's the first part. And that's where the Republican leadership is. They feel badly about our veterans. They feel badly that people are being injured in the war. They feel badly that they don't have decent health care. But then there's the second part. The second part is that accompanying that feeling of sympathy exists a willingness to take deliberate action to reduce that suffering. A willingness to take deliberate action to reduce that suffering. And that's not where the Republican leadership is. That's where the Democratic Party is. That's where I am. And that's where we need to be on behalf of our veterans. We have to be willing to take action to help our veterans. It's our duty. It's our responsibility. This is not an option. This is not an entitlement. This is something that we are bound to do, not only by this generation, but by succeeding generations as well. I want to thank the University of Massachusetts for your willingness to host this forum. I know that I have enjoyed it, and I'm glad that we're focusing on this issue. I want to thank the university for their kindness in inviting me here, and I want to thank all of the organizers here for your willingness to organize this event and focus the necessary attention on a very, very important issue. Thank you very much.